there, folks. This is Renessa Bowley Lane, and welcome to another conversation around creating your perfect work. If you follow me, then you know what I'm about. It's all about helping you to discover, design, and get highly paid to do work you love, whether that means radically changing careers, launching a business, or bringing your big idea to life. Today, I'm so excited. We are going to have a conversation on what it means to be contagious. And I'm going to leave a little mystery around what that means in a moment. But the bottom line in why I'm super excited about this conversation is that oftentimes we can talk about strategy, we can talk about execution, we can talk about all the things that we need to do, right? But ultimately, when it comes to creating, perfect work, it's far more important about who we are and how we show up. Because who we are and how we show up in the marketplace, whether it's in a career, whether it's in a business, whether we have a message we want to get out to the market, that's everything. That's what enrolls people. That's what gets people behind us. That's what gets support. That's what rejuvenates us. And so today I'm so delighted with today's guest because she literally wrote the book on being contagious, and we're going to talk about it. But she walks her talk, and it's such an important conversation to have. But Anese Cavanaugh, right? Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Anese Cavanaugh is here today, and she's sharing the platform, and I'm delighted to have her here. Anese she's devoted to helping people show up and bring their best selves to the table in order to create significant positive impact in their lives. She is the creator of the IEP method, which we're going to talk about, intentional energetic presence. And she's an advisor and a thinking partner to leaders and organizations around the world. She is the author of the book Contagious Culture, Show Up, Set the Tone, and Intentionally Create the Organizations That Thrive. And she's also the author of the newly released book, Contagious You. And that's what we're going to talk about, how you get to be contagious. And so that's kind of the formal bio around her. But here's why I really wanted to include her in this series and in this conversation. And again, it's because who we are and how we show up is so critical. And we don't realize how much power we have, no matter what our position happens to be, no matter where we are on the leadership totem pole or whatnot. And especially when we're trying to make radical changes in our career, if we're stepping into uncharted territory of a business, or if we are kind of pulling together a message to the market and wondering, is the market going to receive us or not? Everything that Anese is going to talk about today influences that. So you are in for a treat. Get your pen and paper handy, pay great attention, because she's going to drop some gems that I think are going to make a huge difference in your ability to get so much more of what you want in your work and your life. So with that said, Anese, welcome. We're so happy to have you here, and thank you for sharing your time with us.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for having me. I'm truly so honored to be included in this conversation. So thank you.
Yay.
Yeah.
Let me ask the first question. Because this conversation is the theme is on perfect work. And when we talk about perfect work, it's not, again, that everything's perfect and all the people you work with are great and that it's easy, and that's not perfect work. But perfect work is being, in the career or business or the role that you're just designed to contribute in. It's what you were born to do. It's the space that you're meant to make a meaningful impact. And you know that this is the mountain you were born to climb. That's perfect work. And so as you think about the work that you're doing right now, how do you know that that's perfect work for you now? Like, obviously, that could evolve and change, but how do you know that the impact that you're making on people and organizations now is where you're supposed to be?
Oh gosh, I love that question so much. Well, for me right now in this moment in my life, the reason I know why it's perfect work is because I feel in alignment. My body feels good. When I wake up in the morning, I feel in alignment. I'm ready to get out. I'm ready to contribute. When I have a hard day or a tricky day, it's easy for me to recover and come back to my own space because I can come back to purpose. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's always been a guiding light. Like from when I started my business almost 20 years ago, has been really looking at what feels most important to me, mm-hmm. and then really paying attention to what feels good. Mm-hmm. And I've led, my entire career has been led. I think my leadership style is really leading by intuition, and then allowing myself to bounce up against edges where I might be uncomfortable, and noticing, is that discomfort can I move through the discomfort in service of service?
Mhm.
Or do I stop the discomfort because my ego gets caught up, or because I'm going on the wrong path? And then it would become imperfect work. So that's been kind of my guardrails, so to speak.
Got it. Well, I'm excited because we're going to talk a lot about intuition in this conversation as well. We're going to talk a lot about presence. We're going to talk a lot about energy, like all the things that's your wheelhouse, and we're gonna nail it. But I read Contagious You, and I like the book a lot. I like the content. I like the energy. I like all the pieces of it. Some of us listening, sometimes we feel unseen, we feel unheard, we feel unnoticed, we feel unimportant. It doesn't matter, again, how much money you earn, because a lot of these women are high achieving women and good salaries, but we can oftentimes feel like who we are doesn't necessarily matter. Make the case for us, because you say that all of us are contagious. Everything about us is contagious. Give us the proof for that. Like, help folks to understand why this topic is even so critical.
Oh, that's so good. I love your questions, girl.
Yeah.
Well, there's science to back it up. So there has been research done. There's a couple different pieces. So one, when we walk into a room, when we get together, when we see another human being, within a tenth of a second, we're deciding if we like the person, trust the person, if they're credible, if we want to hang out with them within a tenth of a second. So, and I talk about that in the book. So that's part of what's happening. That's just our mirror neurons operating, our subconscious, like all these different things are assessing what's happening within a tenth of a second. And that was done, there was a study at Princeton University called First Impression Studies. And you can change the first impression over time. You can totally change it, but within a tenth of a second. So that's one piece. The other piece is that because of our mirror neurons, when we're talking together, if I start to bring negative energy in, unless you are really good at holding your state, you're actually probably going to match my energetic energy or my energetic state. So there's a way that I talk about it as the lowest vibration in the room will win.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so lowest vibration in the room will win unless there is somebody who's really, really good at holding their state. And in this case, since we're talking about it, it's us.
Wow.
As soon as you know it, it's your job to hold your state.
Wow.
So yeah, it's fun, right?
Here's why this is so important, folks. Because for all of us listening in, a lot of you are thinking about making radical shifts in your work. And in making that radical shift, you're stepping into territory that's very uncharted, a place where maybe you had a great track record of success. And even though you're brilliant and amazing, you don't have the same track record of success or the same confidence going into that space. Yes, we're going to build it, but it's not there yet. And so when we're stepping into these spaces and we're doing these different things, oftentimes how other people show up can influence us, particularly if we're not able to hold our state. So if your spouse is on board with whatever this shift happens to be, if he or she is not on board, then you've got a problem, because you've got to hold that space in order to be courageous enough to step up and do what you need to do. If you are having to network with people who can potentially open doors for you, their energy or wherever they are in their, frame of mind, if it's not positive, then you've got to hold that space, because as she said, the lowest vibration in the room is going to win. And so for a lot of us, our dreams die not out there on the battlefield of the marketplace when we're doing it. The dreams die in some of these intimate conversations that we're having with folks, because we don't know how to manage our own level of contagiousness. Is not a word, but is it? It's contagious.
I'll take it. I'll take it. I mean, I think you're pointing to a really important piece, especially as especially as everyone's going out and they're making career changes and they're interviewing and whatnot. If I walk into a room for an interview, or to make my case in a sales pitch or whatever, and I have got doubt, or I am worried about looking good, or whatever might be going on. And if I've got that, now I'm projecting the energy of doubt and a lack of confidence. The other person is going to pick up on that. They're going to match it. Then what happens is they're going to reflect that back to me. Then I pick up on it, and we have this big energetic collusion happening. So before I even walk into that room, and this is part of the IEP methodology, before I even walk into that room, I want to get so clear and grounded in my own energetic state about what is my intention, what's the energy I'm bringing in, what do I believe, why am I here, and how do I want to show up? And if I do that, then I get to go in as the highest vibration. And even if that person is really like, I don't like this person, like, you know, even if they're a total naysayer, I call it a George or a Georgette. Yeah. Even if they're really low vibe and they're like, I can still hold my state. It doesn't necessarily feel great. Yeah. But I need to be able to hold my state. Yeah. The other piece, just to kind of put a bow on the reason why we're so contagious, is the other piece is that, you know, they've done research looking at how what our impact is. And, you know, as low as 7% of our impact is in the actual words we're saying. But the other 93% is in our presence. So it's our tone of voice, our facial expressions, our body language. That's what people are responding to. And so if you look at that, you've got 1/10 of a second to make a first impression. 93% of your impact is actually in how you're showing up. And then you look at this other piece around the lowest vibrational win. Put those two things together, it is very much worth spending some time working your IEP before you go in to do anything.
Yeah. What's really interesting about what you just said is, and we're going to talk about the IEP method in a moment, but it's really taking ownership of how you should, like, I can't necessarily control the next person. I can influence the next person, but I can't control the next person. I don't know what day they had or what's going on in their lives or their childhood. Like, I don't know any of that, and I can't control that, right? Yeah. But I can influence whether or not a conversation devolves into, you know, a hot mess or not. But I think the challenge for some of us is that we're often in a reactive state. So, you know, if Anese and I come into a conversation, depending on what your mood is, I end up mirroring where you are. Right. Like, if you're in a great mood and I come home and it's, you know, you're excited to see me, then we're going to have a great conversation. Right. If I come home and you look like you're pissed off at me for whatever reason, now the entire rest of the evening is going to be wonky because I am kind of succumbing to whatever energy vibration you're bringing to the room. Right. And I think as we're listening, what I'm hearing her say is that we get to take ownership and we get to be much more accountable, and we get to influence where energy and conversations and all of that flow in our presence. Am I hearing you correctly?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It basically, to me, it boils down to being the author of our life and being the cause versus that effect of what's happening around us. Because we really, truly do not have control over anything outside, nothing, but we do have total control over ourselves. And so by setting an intention, by being clear, by holding my own space, I get to better react and proact to whatever's going on around me.
Got it. So you mentioned, and you talked a little bit about it, but I kind of want to tie it up some. When you talk about being contagious, you talk about it from a positive perspective and a negative perspective, right? Yeah. So explain to us how, because we're each responsible for ourselves, how can we be contagious positively and how can we be contagious negatively, so that then we can walk away and begin to own how we show up.
Okay, great. So to me, the being positive contagiously, or being contagious positively, it is looking at what is it that you're putting out into the world. Okay. You know, so what is it you're putting out into the world? So if here's what I love about being contagious. It doesn't take a lot of work. Presence begets more presence. Just like kindness begets more kindness, just like ownership begets more ownership, you know, everything we do. So however I'm showing up, if I'm truly present and showing up in the way and putting that energy out, you're more likely to catch that. Just like busyness begets more busyness, complaining begets more complaining, blaming begets more blaming. Like, we can go up the spiral really beautifully, or we can also go down the tubes really, really quickly as well. Right. And what I know and what I've seen after many, many years of doing this work is that in every moment, even if we're starting to find ourselves going to a negatively contagious avenue, in any moment, we have got a choice point to actually stop, take a breath, shift it, and decide what's the littlest thing I can do right now to get myself into a better state, to be more of a contribution to this moment.
Got it.
And even that intention to me is contagious. You think about, you and I we're girlfriends and we're hanging out, and I start to go down a complaining path and everything. In any moment, I can stop that and shift to something different. You also, as my girlfriend, can catch me spiraling down and can say, hey, niece, what's the request you have instead of the complaint? Like, I hear your complaint. What would you like instead?
Yeah.
When you do that, you've actually just broken my pattern around starting to go down a negatively contagious path. You haven't caught it. And instead, you've actually been in service of me. So now we can come up to a more balanced and life-giving conversation versus soul-sucking, which is where we're going to go if we keep complaining.
No, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
One of the things you talk about in your book is this idea of awareness and being aware. And so I certainly want to move the conversation from theory, because a lot of times we can consume ideas from the perspective of, oh, that would be great. My mom should really hear this, or this would be, my husband should really hear this, or whatever.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're not aware of how we even show up, or even that this is applicable, right? So how do we become aware? Like, what questions do we need to begin to ask ourselves to even be able to assess where we are in terms of how contagious we are, and whether it's positive or negative? Like, what are the elements that we need to assess in ourselves to be able to get a clearer sense of where we are?
Okay, great. So I think that 70% of this work is an awareness.
Okay.
70% is awareness. The other 30% is what you actually do with it.
Okay.
In my mind, as soon as we have awareness that we are either having the impact we want or we're not, we're winning. As soon as I have the awareness, because without awareness, I'm going to struggle and suffer and continue to do whatever I'm doing that I don't even know I'm doing.
Yeah.
With awareness, now I have a choice to actually step in and own it and make a different move.
Okay.
So when I invite people into this work, I ask them 5 magical questions.
Okay.
And this is to start to help them see where they're at and if they need to make changes. So the first question is, am I having the impact I want to have? Am I having the impact I want to have? The second question is, do I feel the way I want to feel? It's a big one. The third question is, do people follow me because they have to or because they want to? And this could be follow me, work with me, hang out with me, stay married to me.
Right.
Right? Because they have to. I'm giving them a job. We have a marriage license, whatever, or because they want to, right? The fourth question is, am I living in alignment with my core values?
That's great.
Am I living in alignment with my core values? And the fifth question is, what kind of a culture am I personally creating?
Interesting. Tell us more about that question.
Sure. So what I find, and this is why I wrote Contagious Culture, the first book, a couple of years ago, is because what I find is that most people tend to think that culture is happening outside of themselves. It's their boss creates the culture, the executives create the culture, the culture creates the culture. But what I've found in 20 years of doing this work, Vanessa, is that it's actually every single one of us is creating the culture. The culture gets created by how each of us show up. It's what we bring to every day. It's what we bring to our team meetings. It doesn't matter if I'm the janitor or the CEO of my organization. Whatever energy I'm bringing into that organization is contributing to the core culture. So if I love my culture, there's likely something that I'm doing to create that. If I don't love my culture, there's also likely something I'm doing there. If even it's just that I'm complaining or I'm gossiping about it, or I don't say anything about it, or I go home and talk about it all night. So if that fifth question, what kind of a culture am I personally creating, that sets me free, because as soon as I look at that, I can go, okay, I'm not loving my culture. So how am I showing up that's actually contributing to that? If I'm really honest with myself, I'm probably complaining about it. I'm probably judging people. I'm probably not saying anything. I'm probably making complaints instead of requests. If I'm really honest, I'm going to start to see how I'm contributing to what I love or what I don't love in my life.
There's a lot of goodies
to
unpack on this, and there are a couple that stand out, and I'll probably go in reverse order so I don't forget. But I love the idea of complaint versus request, and especially in kind of coming full circle around creating your perfect work. When we're at places where we need to make changes, or we want to make changes, or we're bored and burned out and unfulfilled at work, or, whatever, we can spend a lot of time talking about the problem,
Right.
as opposed to figuring out, okay, what do I want to be different here?
Right.
And so for a number of us listening in, you may have been thinking about making a shift for a really long time, and you've been complaining at the happy hour or whatever about what you don't like, and all of that. This is the time to start, what's my request? Like,
Yeah.
what's my request? What's my prayer? What's my whatever? In terms, what do I want to be different in my work? What do I really want to do? And the more honest we can get about that, right?
Yeah.
Then we can figure out what the opportunities are.
Yeah.
But if we can't get out of complaining to a point of having a desire, and you actually talk about this, and maybe we'll segue in a little bit about the want dial.
Yeah.
But if we can get from a place of complaining and lamenting and bemoaning and woe be unto meing about it, and really get honest about what is it that I truly want, because you can have anything you want, you just got to be clear about what that is.
Yeah.
Then we can figure out the opportunities, the pathway to the cash, and so on and so forth.
Right.
I think that's really, really critical. But a number of these questions, and hopefully folks are able to write them down, these become almost like, not checklists, but really, great points of connection in figuring out what's the right direction for you moving forward. Like, am I living in alignment with my values? And as I think about making a shifting into entrepreneurship or whatever, is that going to get me closer to living in alignment with my values? Because if it doesn't, then you're going to have a sucky boss, and the boss is you, So
right.
I love the questions, and I love them as a litmus test for how we make decisions, especially, do I feel the way I want to feel?
Yeah.
And for a lot of us, we don't.
Yeah.
And what needs to change in order for me to feel more of what I want to feel in the building of my business or my career or whatever that happens to be? Those are beautiful questions.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad. I mean, I have to say, like, with those questions, so I've used those questions on tens of thousands of people. And what I found is that those 5 questions, if you're answering anything but a yes, I'm having the impact I want to have. Yes, I feel the way I want to feel. Yes, people follow me because they want to, not because they have to. Yes, I'm totally in alignment with my core values. And yes, I'm creating a culture that I love. If your answers are anything but that, then there is beautiful work for you to do around really getting clear about your intentions, your energy, what you're putting out there, and how present you are in your life.
Okay.
And so I just want to offer that. The other piece is this, the complaining piece. That's a little bit of gold, because there's the complaint, which, if you think about any of us, none of us like to sit and listen to somebody who's complaining.
Yeah.
The energy of a complaint, it's contagious, it's heavy, it's not very inspiring. And so if you are going about your life and you're trying to make your career change, and you're just in a place of lamenting and complaining and everything, you're not going to be attractive to anybody else. And so the minute I switch my complaint to any kind of a request, and you can always find one, it's like, oh, it's so hot in here. Okay, well, the request is, I want to turn the air conditioning on. Oh, George never calls me back. Okay, the request is, George, would you mind calling me back within 24 hours? The minute I get into right relationship with myself around what I want, then now I'm in a more powerful place, and I can actually start to set my sights on that thing. And I would invite people, because one of the things that came up for me when you were saying it is, people out there might be going, well, I don't actually know what I want instead. Right? So that's fine.
Yeah.
Let that be okay. And then start practicing in your life any single complaint that you have, anything like, my pencils aren't sharp enough. Whatever the complaint might be, any complaint, start practicing the muscle of turning it into a request.
I love that.
And what will happen is your brain will rewire, so you start to automatically think that way. And so then it's going to become more obvious to you what it is you actually really do want on the bigger scope.
That right there could save a marriage. That's great.
Yeah, for sure. 1,000%.
I mean, it could certainly save a relationship. Oh my gosh. So you mentioned in your book about this concept of the want dial. And want, W-A-N-T, the want dial. Tell us briefly about that, and kind of how that comes into play with the rest of this conversation.
Yeah. So I just started to notice years ago. I mean, I think when we're little, we want things. I mean, I have kids. I have a 14-year-old and a 19-year-old now. And when they were little, you remember, it's like, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. And, you know, watching kids, I think, is one of the greatest teachers that we can ever have in terms of human psychology and what happens to us as we become adults. And what I've noticed is that when we're little, we want everything. And then we get told, like, don't ask for too much, or we get really busy with life and everything. And then what I find is we as human beings start to turn down our want dial and what we think is possible for us and what we allow ourselves to want, because maybe it feels selfish, or, you know, in my experience, it's just like, I know for me, if I'm not paying attention to what I want, my want machine can kind of go to sleep. And so the want dial that I talk about in the book is really starting to look at what is it that you want and how do you actually turn it up so that you raise your level of havingness. You know, so you don't just want a job to pay the bills and to cover your insurance and to have good, like, you know, have a good balance in your life or whatever. I actually really challenge people to look at what would, if you were to want at a higher level, if you were to turn your want dial up 10 times, what would you allow yourself to want? And so I think that there's tremendous value in practicing. And I talk about an exercise in the book where you start to write out what you want. And it could be like, I want a cup of coffee. I want a good night's sleep. I want an extra Post-it. Like, it could be anything. And what happens is when people start, for the first 10, they have a really hard time figuring out what they want. And then I can't stop them. And then it kind of opens up the floodgates to looking at from a career standpoint. Okay, what is it I actually really do want? And then you're off to the races.
Awesome. No, I think that's beautiful. I think for a lot of us listening in, you're right. Over time, you do begin to dampen what you believe is possible.
Yeah.
And when it comes to creating perfect work, it's all about what you want.
Yeah.
It's about the work that you want, how you want to deliver it, how, you know, what you want your lifestyle to be like. Like, all of those are elements when you start to fit, because what's perfect for me may not be perfect for you, right?
Sure. Yeah. And I also find that it changes, you know, so for me, what I want, I've just been finding this for myself in the last year. The things that I want now in my life are very different than what I wanted for the last 5 years. You know, so the last 5 years, I wanted to write more books. I wanted to really scale this work. And I threw my that, and I've loved it. And now as I'm coming to this next phase of my life, I'm like, ooh, there's things that I actually didn't want as much over the last 5 years that I actually do want now. And so my want dial is shifting in different domains of my life, which are delicious.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important for everyone listening to this to know, like, you might be in a period of your life where your want right now is completely around your relationships or having children or building the career or getting the perfect job or whatever. And to allow yourself full permission to be exactly where you're at and to enjoy every moment of whether your want dial is at a 2 or it's at a 50. Like, it doesn't, just to enjoy it and to be aware of where it's at.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I like that. I like being okay with what it is that you want. That's gold right there. So let's talk a little bit about, because the cornerstone of your work with organizations and with individuals is this IEP method. Tell us about that concept. Where did it come from? And then let's kind of unpack it a little bit so people can begin to understand how to apply it to their own situations.
Great. So IEP stands for Intentional Energetic Presence. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's being intentional about the energetic presence you bring to anything you do. So whether it's presenting at a board meeting or talking to your child or doing the dishes, it's being intentional about the energy you're bringing to that action or that activity. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is, if we break those 3 words apart, you've got your intention, which is what you want to have happen. You have your energy, which is the energy you're projecting, the energy and the stamina that you actually have to make the things in your life happen, you know, so that we're not all exhausted, because that doesn't work. And then there's your presence, which is how you're showing up and how present you are to your life, to the person you're with, to whatever's going on. So I look at IEP in those 2 frames, you know, so being intentional about your energetic presence and then being conscious about your intentions, your energy, and your presence throughout. The way that work came up is, and there is a methodology, and I'll give you the 3 parts of it, but the way that work came up is that I actually started my work years ago as a kinesiologist working with athletes. And then I went and I worked in corporate America, and I did health and productivity, and I worked in healthcare, and a ton of different ways of playing with human dynamics and the human spirit, and basically performance and what happens for people. And very, very long story short, when my child was born back in 2002, or actually he was born in 2000, but in 2002, I really was missing my work, but I didn't want to go and work for another company anymore. So what I did was I pulled all my favorite pieces of everything I'd done, working with athletes, working in corporate, working with healthcare. And I basically created a job description for myself that would allow me to work on my own time and do the work that I love, that would be my perfect work, but that also would allow me to be fully available for my kids. And so, very long story short, I pulled all these pieces together. Nobody was going to give me that job. So I created a company out of it. I created the job for myself, built a company out of it. And then what happened was I started to realize that I had a lot of business leaders coming to me to get better at their performance, to get better at their culture, get better at their strategy. But what I was noticing is that no matter how good we got them at their skills, no matter how good they were at doing feedback or communication or whatever, if they didn't have their IEP right, which at the time when I started, it wasn't calling for IEP yet, but if they didn't have their intentions, energy, and presence in alignment, that they were leaving 85% of potential good impact on the table, and they were often doing even more harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
So the example of that is that, I would do, if I do great feedback or leadership development training with a company, and they get all the skills, but the whole time they're showing up in a way that they're not being intentional, their energy's not great, they're totally exhausted, they're not present, then actually those skills might even do more harm than good, because they're like, look, I've got good leadership skills, but they're making people feel terrible. Mm-hmm. So I started to really pull apart like what actually was necessary in order for people to have the best impact possible. And that's where the IEP work kind of unfolded.
Wow. Yeah. What I like about this concept is, because a lot of people talk about intention and being intentional. And so, okay, well, what is it, what's the outcome you want and this and that. But there's a piece of so the outcome is just me deciding what it is I want, right? But there is an accountability that comes when you deal with the energy part. Like, what energy are you going to bring to this situation? Right. And so for a lot of us, we may want a different relationship with our manager. We may want a different relationship with our spouse or colleague or whatever. But without that middle piece, that's where the personal responsibility comes in. Yeah. And I like that insertion, because if we are transitioning into perfect work and creating it, so even with your work, you had to ultimately decide that you were willing to create what it is that you wanted to deliver, but you have to be willing to show up in a certain way in order to be able to facilitate that as well. And so we'll have to show up in scary places. We'll have to have conversations that we haven't had before. We'll have to enroll people in our vision in ways that we've not had to do. And my intention might be to get your buy-in into my project or, whatever, but there's got to be an energy on my end in order to also support and facilitate that. And that becomes my responsibility. I think that's a really interesting take.
Absolutely. And even, taking it past, to your point about like taking it into real life and not just the theoretical, it's, if your intention is to create that impact, you're responsible for the energy you're bringing to make that happen. But the other side is this: one of the biggest leadership responsibilities that we have is our self-care. I mean, this is one of the things for everybody listening to this. This is the thing that I actually care about the most in leadership. It's two things. One is our self-care, and self-care to me means the things we eat, how we take care of our bodies, how we take care of ourselves. How we nourish our relationships, how we talk to ourselves is a form of self-care. So there's the self-care component. And then the other thing that I care about the most in the world is then paying that forward in service of creating good impact in the world. We have to have both. And so when you're looking at your perfect work, my invitation to people is look at the impact you want to make. Look at how you want to serve the world. Look at how you want to serve people. Like, get in there and be totally in service of. And at the same time, take remarkable care of yourself so that you can be the best instrument of change possible. And that's really what the IEP work is speaking to. It's being intentional about the impact you want to make. The energy part is being intentional about the energy you're bringing, but it's also making sure that you are so well armed and so well resourced so that you've got the energy and the stamina to do it. And then of course the presence piece, like you have to have that as well.
I think that's it's beautifully said. And I think so many of us, present company included, I brought you onto, this show for a reason.
Yeah.
We underestimate the value of the energy. Like we think that's something that we can just plow through, sheer will, put your nose to the grind, because we know how to function. Like if I've got a meeting tomorrow, I know how to function through that meeting.
Right.
But I'm still not at 100%.
Right.
Because it's not possible if I haven't slept, or it's not possible if, and I may want to have a great relationship, with a spouse or whatnot, because if I have a great relationship with the spouse, man, that fuels a great business, or that fuels a great career. But if I don't have the energy to be able to do that, I don't have time. And I'll speak very, vulnerably. I've been working my butt off the last 2 weeks. I mean, on a major project, and, getting my head to the ground. And I mean, I haven't had this many like all-nighters since like college. Like, it's been a long time. But again, I can get up and go and deliver. But I've seen how I've shown up with my family. Like, I'm not short and, pissy or anything like that. But the amount of presence that I've given, my husband came home in the middle of the day or something, and he was like, oh, something, and when are you going to spend time with me? And I was like, I got time for that. I got to realize what I'm doing. But I realized in the moment, I was like, man, I blew off a moment.
Yeah.
Like that was a moment for him to be vulnerable, and I didn't have the energy to feel. And I wasn't mad, and I didn't.
Sure.
And I didn't, blow him. I blew him off, but I reckon, and he might not have even noticed. Like, it's not something that he was going to hold this record of wrong.
Right.
But I recognized that, wow, that was a precious moment to connect. Yeah. And it could have only been 2.5 minutes, but it could have been a real connection that I didn't have. I had the time, but I didn't have the energy to be present. Yeah. And so a lot of times, no matter what it is we want to create in our world, if we haven't done the self-care, and self-care is not something I can just do today and then I'm going to be good to go tomorrow. There's a compound effect to that. So I really take this to heart. And for folks, as you're thinking about major transitions, it's not just the connection and do I have the sponsor and do I have someone that's going to open a door for me and all that. That's important. But these are the unseen elements that can make or break over the long haul your success and or your fulfillment on the journey to success. And there are few things worse than hitting the mark, whatever it happens to be, and then you get there and it just does not feel nearly as good as you thought it was going to, because of all the things that we're talking about here. So I really appreciate you bringing that as a cornerstone in the conversation. I think it's super important.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so glad. I mean, I think that I love your awareness. I think what you just said, I don't think there's a human being out there that can't relate to what you just said.
Yeah.
Myself included, of where we're out there, we're doing a ton of stuff because we care about our work. We care about this. And then, sometimes there are those weeks you're in it right now. There's a 2-week marathon that you're in the midst of that right now. This is the priority, and your awareness around, okay, wow, here's an area that I want to give a little bit more TLC to, or here's an area, to me, the awareness, again, that's the 70%, and so then with that comes the kindness to go, okay, wow, it didn't handle that the way I wanted to handle that. And I'm going to make that up to him later. Or when this whole launch is done, I'm going to like dive in and spend 3 days with my kids in my pajamas, or whatever it might be. That to me is a form of self-care in itself.
Yeah.
It's noticing, like, so again, I have a 14-year-old and a 19-year-old. For me, it's noticing when I don't show up the way that I want to show up for somebody, or I miss the mark on something because I'm distracted or whatever's happening. Can I give myself the space and the grace to go, wow, Anese, that wasn't how you wanted to do it. And you know what? You're going to do it better next time. And it's okay. I love you. Let's get back in there.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that I would hope for everybody listening, because what I notice is the pummeling that people do to themselves around not showing up great for every single person, or not being perfect at home and perfect at work and all this stuff. And the self-beatings that happen, that actually to me is more damaging than what's actually happening. Is the internal dialogue. So that's one of my prayers, and I talk about that in the book, is like, be kind to yourself and look at your talk and then do everything you can to set yourself up so you can show up as best possible. And then when you don't, like, it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, get back up.
Yeah. This is beautiful. And as we begin to kind of wrap up, I want to encourage folks, get the book, Contagious You. What's the tagline?
It's Contagious You, unlock your power to influence, lead, and create the impact you want.
Yeah. It's that blue book right there in the back to the left of her shoulder. It's that blue book.
It's to the left. It's right here too. There you go.
Yeah, all dog-eared and whatnot. But there are some gems in there around being intentional and how you show up with that, around energy, around presence. There's great pieces in there on how to take, like one of the ones that I loved was around giving yourself buffer time and learning how to take pauses, something I just had not been great at, you know. And so those are all things that in your career and your business, sometimes we don't think we have the luxury to do that, but it actually becomes critical, and you're able to accomplish more and be more productive and have more impact and have more influence in ways that are invigorating and all of that. And so she talks about strategies and whatnot, and there's great questions around awareness, you know, in that book as well. And so I wholly endorse it, would encourage folks to definitely get a copy of it, and particularly as you think about making shifts and how you can show up in a way that you get the support that you need. But in that same vein, Anese certainly has a special gift that she's offering to the group and folks who are listening in. So I'm gonna let you talk about that, and then I'll tell folks how they can access it, and we'll wrap it up.
Okay, great. So just two things to add on, to build on to the way you just wrapped all that up is, one, when everyone listens, when you think about the IEP method, just think of three things. There's three parts, and they're really, really simple. They just require presence and dedication to keep remembering to do them. Mm-hmm. So the first part is just to be able to reboot your presence in the moment. Mm-hmm. So everybody right now listening, all that takes is you come back to presence right now. There's nothing else going on. You're just right here. You're going into that interview, you do a quick reboot, you just be in that moment. When we're in the moment, nothing else around us is stressful, and we can be our best contagious selves in the moment. The second part is to build a strong energetic field, which has to do with what you and I have been talking about around our self-care, our self-talk, our nutrition, all that. And then the third part is just to create intentional impact. Mm-hmm. And so there's a 5-step framework for creating intentional impact that if you do it, and I've seen people use this to get jobs. I've seen people use this to land their spouse. I've seen people use this to have a conversation with their kids. I've seen people use this to get a divorce, I think. And I've seen people use this to close multi-million-dollar deals. So if you do the 5 steps, you're giving yourself guardrails to really have the impact you want. So that's part of the gift that we give people is there's an IEP sheet, which has the entire IEP methodology on it in one page. I did it before any interview. So I actually already did it for us. But you do that. If you go to iep.io, you can download that sheet, mm-hmm. as well as a presence kit, a starter kit, a virtual kit, like all these different pieces. So that's just something that you're absolutely welcome to check out. And the other piece that I wanted to add, Anese, is when you get the book, when you look at Contagious You, please check out the chapter on burnout.
Yeah.
Because this is another thing that I am really leaning into this conversation, especially as we move into this next decade, around where burnout actually comes from. And a lot of people think that burnout comes from, working too much and burning the candle at both ends and not taking care of yourself. Yes, absolutely, that totally plays in. But what I have found in 20 years of doing this work is that there's 7 P's of burnout. And I'll just say the first 4 is disconnecting from presence, disconnecting from purpose, disconnecting from people, mm-hmm. and disconnecting from pain. Those 4 P's right there, if you can reverse those and start to lean in, that can also give you a really beautiful guide / breadcrumbs to creating your perfect job.
Absolutely.
So that's an invitation, a request, a prayer, a begging I have of human beings listening to this. go check that out and see where you're at so you can design and create exactly what you want to do next and set yourself up really beautifully.
Oh, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna put a link, and so everyone, where you see this video, you're actually gonna see a link. We'll put the link to iep.io, and you'll be able to
Great.
grab the goodies that Anese is talking about. But that being said, thank you. This has been an awesome conversation. Thank you for sharing your content. I'm so grateful to you, and I think that everyone listening in is blessed by it, encouraged, challenged. All of those things can coexist at the same time, and so that's great. And so on behalf of Anese and myself, we're just gonna we thank you. We wish you an amazing day, and we wish you every joy and every happiness. And we will see you the next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.